Picture this. You are standing on the sandstone walls of Delhi. It is the winter of 1299 and the ground beneath your bare feet is vibrating. It is a low, sickening hum that travels up your spine and rattles your teeth. You look out over the horizon and the earth is moving, but it is not an earthquake. It is an ocean of flesh, leather, and recurved bows. 200,000 Mongol horsemen of the Chagatai Khanate have surrounded your city. The air stinks of horse sweat and burning villages. Inside the walls, millions of refugees are suffocating in the narrow streets, fighting wild dogs for scraps of rotting meat. Starvation is already tightening its grip on your throat. You know the stories. You know what happens when the Mongol war machine breaches a wall. They do not just conquer, they erase. They build pyramids out of human skulls and leave cities so completely devastated that wolves move into the ruins. You are trapped in a cage of starving people, and the greatest apex predators in human history are picking the lock. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The year is 1299 and the world is already broken. For the better part of a century, the Mongol Empire has treated the globe like a slaughterhouse. They have flatlined the greatest civilizations on earth. They turned the glittering metropolis of Baghdad into a mass grave, dumping so many books into the Tigris River that the water ran black with ink, and butchering so many people it ran red with blood. They swept through Russia, China, and the Middle East not as an army but as a natural disaster. You do not negotiate with a hurricane, and you do not negotiate with the horde. Now their eyes are fixed on the crown jewel of the subcontinent, the Delhi Sultanate. Under the command of Qutlugh Khwaja, a ruthless prince of the Chagatai Khanate, the Mongols are not here to raid. Past incursions into India were just border skirmishes, smash and grab operations to steal gold and test the defenses. This time is different. Qutlugh Khwaja has brought women, children, and livestock. This is a migration wrapped in a military invasion. They are here to evict the current tenants of India permanently. The psychological weight of this moment cannot be overstated. Imagine knowing that an undefeated alien force, a species of warrior that practically lives in the saddle and drinks the blood of their own horses to survive long marches, has decided your home is their next pasture. The Delhi Sultanate is panicking. The royal advisors, men who usually spend their days plotting assassinations and skimming taxes, are begging their ruler to hide. They want him to lock the gates, barricade the palaces, and wait for the Mongols to get bored and leave. It is the logical choice. Every kingdom that marched out to meet the Mongols in open battle was instantly turned into fertilizer. Fighting them on an open plain is military suicide. The Mongols fight like a swarm of angry hornets, firing armor-piercing arrows from composite bows while riding at full gallop, then vanishing before you can swing a sword. But the ruler of Delhi is not a logical man. He's not a noble king who cares about the lives of his subjects, and he certainly is not going to hide behind a wall while a foreign prince camps on his lawn. To stop the ultimate nightmare of the medieval world, the universe decided that India did not need a savior. It needed a psychopath. Enter Alauddin Khalji. If you are looking for a righteous savior to protect India from the Mongol hordes, you have wandered into the wrong century. Alauddin is not a hero. He is a ruthless, cold-blooded predator who just happens to be sitting on the throne that the Mongols want to steal. To understand the mind of the man who is about to face down the apocalypse, you have to look at how he got his crown. He didn't inherit it through divine right. or noble, succession. He bought it with treason and sealed it with blood. Just 3 years earlier, in 1296, the throne of Delhi belonged to his uncle and father-in-law, Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin was a mild-mannered, forgiving old man who looked upon his nephew with absolute trust. Alauddin repaid that trust by luring the elderly sultan to an isolated meeting on the muddy banks of the Ganges River. The pretext was a joyful reunion, a chance for Alauddin to present the dazzling spoils of a recent, unsanctioned military campaign. When the old man stepped off his royal barge, unarmed and smiling, he embraced his nephew. In that exact moment, Alauddin gave a silent signal. 2 trusted assassins stepped forward. The first sword strike deeply wounded the sultan. As the old man scrambled back toward his boat, bleeding heavily into the mud and screaming about his nephew's treacherous heart, the second assassin caught him. He tackled the sultan to the ground, pinned him, and aggressively sawed his head off. Alauddin did not bury the evidence. He placed his uncle's severed, dripping head on the tip of a spear and paraded it through his military camps, letting the blood rain down on the dust. He used the stolen gold from his campaigns to literally hurl coins into the crowds, buying the loyalty of the army while the previous king's head stared down at them with dead eyes. He was sending a permanent chilling message to the entire subcontinent. I am not constrained by morality, by family ties, or by the laws of God. I am constrained only by power, and I will do whatever it takes to hold it. This is the psychopath ruling the Delhi Sultanate when the Chagatai Khanate comes knocking. History is littered with the corpses of soft kings who inherited their titles and crumbled the moment a genuine existential threat kicked down their doors. Alauddin is not soft. He has spent his entire reign sleeping with a dagger under his pillow, purging his own nobles, confiscating wealth, and building a domestic surveillance state so intensely oppressive that people are terrified to whisper treason in their own bedrooms. He has outlawed alcohol, banned social gatherings among the elite, and practically nationalized the economy to fund his one true obsession, his war machine. Alauddin understands a fundamental, ugly truth about the medieval world that the dead kings of Europe and Asia did not. Survival is not a matter of justice, and it is certainly not a matter of prayer. Survival is an equation of mathematics and violence. To fight the Mongols, you cannot rely on disorganized peasant levies or cowardly, self-serving lords. You need a standing, professional, hyper-disciplined army. Alauddin has engineered exactly that. He pays his soldiers directly from the imperial treasury, cutting out the feudal middlemen. He instituted a strict system of branding horses to prevent cavalry officers from committing fraud. He dictates the precise price of grain, cloth, and weapons in the markets so that his soldiers can always afford to live. And if a merchant is caught short-changing a customer by even an ounce, Alauddin's spies ensure that the equivalent weight in human flesh is violently carved straight from the merchant's body. He is a tyrant, a usurper, and a domestic butcher. But as the Mongol dust cloud blotted out the sun over Delhi, the terrified citizens looking down from the sandstone ramparts realized a horrifying, uncomfortable truth. They did not want a saint sitting on the throne. Saints get crucified, saints get their cities burned, their wives violated and their children enslaved. When a pack of rabid wolves is actively tearing at your front door, you do not pray for a gentle shepherd to protect you. You pray for a bigger, meaner, more vicious wolf. You pray for a monster who knows exactly how to sink his teeth into the jugular and tear. As Alauddin Khalji straps on his heavy armor and mounts his war horse, looking out at the 200,000 invincible horsemen gathered to annihilate his world, he is not feeling fear. He is calculating the slaughter, The Mongols are used to breaking the minds of civilized men, but they have never fought someone who is already completely unhinged. The unstoppable force of the Mongol Empire is about to slam headfirst into the immovable psychosis of the Delhi Sultan, and the arid ground at Kili is about to drink an ocean of blood. The march of Qutlugh Khwaja across the Indus River is not a military campaign. It is a migration of pure, unadulterated death. When we think of medieval armies, we picture slow-moving columns of men weighed down by cumbersome supply wagons, getting bogged down in the mud and stopping every few miles to forage for food. The Mongol war machine does not have supply lines. They do not need them. They are a self-sustaining organism of destruction. Every rider brings string of remount horses. When they run out of rations, they do not starve. They simply open a small vein in their horse's neck, drink a few mouthfuls of hot blood to keep themselves alive, patch the wound, and keep riding. They are a localized apocalypse, a swarm of locusts made of leather, iron, and recurve bows, moving at a speed that breaks the minds of conventional generals. As the 200,000 horsemen of the Chagatai Khanate tear through the Punjab region, they employ a strategy that absolutely paralyzes the Delhi Sultanate's defenses. Normally, an invading force must stop to lay siege to the frontier forts, painstakingly starving out the garrisons to secure their rear before moving deeper into enemy territory. Qutlugh Khwaja does the exact opposite. He gives his commanders a chillingly simple order. Do not stop. Do not waste time burning small villages. Do not waste blood besieging minor castles. Ignore the border guards completely. They are heading straight for the jugular. They are marching directly on Delhi. The psychological impact of this strategy is devastating. The frontier garrisons lock their gates and watch in absolute horror as an ocean of horsemen simply bypasses them, leaving a trail of crushed earth miles wide. The realization hits the local populations like a physical blow. The Mongols are not here to raid the borders. They are here to decapitate the empire. What follows is one of the most catastrophic refugee crises in medieval history. As the Mongol horde moves south, pushing a wall of terror ahead of it, the peasants of the subcontinent abandon their farms, their homes, and their ancestral lands. They grab whatever they can carry and run toward the only place they believe can offer them salvation, the towering sandstone walls of Delhi. Within weeks, the glittering capital of the Sultanate turns into a colossal, suffocating slum. Delhi was built to house a vast and prosperous population, but it was never designed to absorb the panicked millions hemorrhaging from the northern provinces. The roads leading into the city are choked with a human tsunami of misery. Men, women, and children are crushed to death in the stampedes at the city gates. Once inside, the nightmare only deepens. Every street, every alleyway, every rooftop, and every gutter is packed with terrified, unwashed bodies. The infrastructure collapses instantly. The markets are stripped bare of food in a matter of hours. The price of grain skyrockets until it becomes a mythological concept rather than a purchasable good. A handful of rice becomes worth more than a human life. People are drinking from stagnant, diseased puddles. The stench of rotting livestock, human waste, and unburied corpses hangs over the city like a toxic fog. Before the Mongols have even fired a single arrow at the walls of Delhi, the city is already eating itself from the inside out. Starvation and disease are doing Qutlugh Khwaja's work for him. From the fortified citadel of Siri, Alauddin Khalji watches his capital suffocate. His advisors, trembling and pale, fall to their knees. They beg the Sultan to fortify his palace, to seal the inner gates, and to wait out the storm. They argue that Delhi's walls are massive, that the Mongols are horsemen who hate siege warfare, and that eventually they will have to retreat. But Alauddin is a predator, and a predator knows when he is being backed into a corner. He looks at the starving millions clogging his streets. He looks at the dwindling water reserves. He understands the cold mathematical reality that his advisors are too cowardly to accept. Delhi is not a fortress anymore. It is a giant, locked cage, and the air is running out. If they stay behind the walls, they will not die in battle. They will die coughing up blood in the gutters, starved into submission, until the Mongols simply walk over the piles of corpses to claim the throne. The walls are a death trap. The only way out of this nightmare is to open the gates, march out into the blinding dust of the Kili plains, and look the apocalypse directly in the eye. The gates of Delhi groan open, and the immense war machine of the Sultanate vomits out into the blinding sunlight. Alauddin Khalji is doing exactly what every military manual in the medieval world tells you never to do. He is marching out to meet a Mongol army on a completely flat, featureless plain. This is the plain of Kili, located just a few miles from the capital. It is not a place of rolling hills, deep rivers, or strategic choke points. It is a massive, dusty anvil of baked earth and brittle scrub brush, and by stepping onto it, Alauddin is volunteering to be the hammer's target. To understand the sheer suicidal insanity of this decision, you have to understand how medieval warfare against the Mongols actually works. When a traditional army fights on an open plain, they rely on rigid formation. They build solid walls of wooden shields. They anchor their flanks, and they wait for the enemy to crash against them in a physical collision of mass. But the Mongols do not crash. They are a fluid, formless nightmare. If you march out to fight them in the open, they will simply refuse to engage in hand-to-hand combat. They will ride in wide, sweeping circles around your static formation, unleashing a relentless, suffocating blizzard of armor-piercing arrows. They will shoot your horses out from under you, leaving heavy knights floundering in the dirt. They will aim for the unarmored faces and throats of your infantry. They will bleed your army piece by piece, hour by hour, until exhaustion, dehydration, and sheer panic collapse your lines. And when your formation finally breaks, when your terrified soldiers drop their heavy shields and turn their backs to run, that is when the Mongols put away their bows, draw their curved swords, and begin the butchery. Fighting them on an open plain is not a tactical battle. It is an organized execution. Yet Alauddin marches out anyway, dragging a force of nearly 300,000 men and almost 3,000 war elephants onto the suffocating dust of Kili. The logistical footprint of this army is staggering. The ground physically rolls and shakes under the weight of the war elephants. These are massive, terrifying beasts draped in heavy iron chainmail, their tusks fitted with poisoned steel blades designed to slice a horse and rider in half with a single sweep of their heads. Behind them marches a wall of battle-hardened infantry, mercenaries, and desperate conscripts, gripping their spears with sweating, trembling palms. And flanking them all are the elite Rajput and Turkic cavalry of the Sultanate, men heavily armoured in steel and mail, riding muscular horses draped in thick, protective padding. As the Sultanate's army slowly forms its battle lines, an immense, choking cloud of yellow dust rises into the atmosphere, physically blotting out the sun. Across the barren expanse, the Chagatai Mongol horde is waiting. 200,000 light cavalrymen sit in absolute, terrifying silence. They are not banging their swords against their shields. They are not screaming blood-curdling war cries to build up their courage. They are conserving their energy, watching the Indians deploy with the cold, calculating gaze of a butcher inspecting a slab of meat on the table. The distance between the two colossal armies shrinks to just a few bowshots. The air at Kili is incredibly thick with the stench of horse dung, human sweat, and raw, primal fear. The sheer volume of men and animals packed into this space creates a stifling microclimate of trapped heat. Soldiers are suffocating inside their heavy iron helmets before a single blade has been swung in anger. Alauddin Khalji sits atop his royal elephant in the dead center of the line, surveying the horizon. He knows that his colossal army is a fragile, unwieldy organism. If the Mongols are allowed to dictate the pace of the battle, his massive numbers will mean absolutely nothing. His elephants will be driven mad by thousands of arrows and turn around to trample his own infantry. His heavy cavalry will be exhausted to death, chasing phantoms in the dust. To survive this meat grinder, Alauddin knows he has to firmly anchor his army. He explicitly orders his generals to hold the line at all costs. No one is to charge without his direct, explicit command. They are to absorb the inevitable Mongol arrows, hold the defensive formation, and force the enemy into a grinding, brutal close-quarters slaughterhouse where the heavy armor and sheer physical mass of the Sultanate can physically crush the lighter Mongol horses. It is a high-stakes, staring contest between two apex predators, with hundreds of thousands of lives hanging in the balance. But in an army built on ruthless ambition and violence, discipline is a very fragile illusion. And out on the right flank, a general named Zafar Khan is gripping his reins, staring at the Mongols through the dust, and feeling the overwhelming, intoxicating urge to break every single rule of survival. Enter Zafar Khan. If Alauddin Khalji is the monster sitting on the throne, Zafar Khan is his fangs. He is the greatest and most terrifying general of the Delhi Sultanate. But in the paranoid, cutthroat world of medieval politics, greatness is a death sentence. Alauddin does not have friends, he only has potential enemies. And Zafar Khan, who has crushed Mongol scouting parties in the past, is becoming a massive problem. The soldiers worship him, the citizens cheer for him. To a domestic tyrant who sleeps with a dagger under his pillow, Zafar Khan's popularity is far more dangerous than the 200,000 Mongols currently waiting outside. As the dust swirls over the Kili plain, Zafar Khan commands the right flank of the Delhi army. He leads the absolute elite, heavily armored cavalry, Rajput and Turkic warriors born to fight. But right now, they are slowly baking alive inside their iron armor under the suffocating heat. The tension is so thick you can hear the metal grinding as restless warhorses shift their weight. Across the killing field, the Mongols begin their deadly psychological game. They do not launch a full assault. Instead, they send waves of light cavalry forward to taunt. They ride in, unleash a localized blizzard of armor-piercing arrows into Zafar Khan's formation, and wheel away, laughing. The arrows thud into wooden shields and punch through horse barding, drawing panicked neighs and fresh blood that stains the arid dirt. Alauddin's orders were explicitly clear. Do not break formation. No one moves. They are to stand there, absorb the arrows, and force the Mongols into a static melee. But Zafar Khan is not a man who will stand still and be carved apart from a distance. As his loyal men begin to drop, dying in their own blood without permission to strike back, the restraint finally snaps. Zafar Khan makes a decision that will change the entire geometry of the battle, and possibly the history of the subcontinent. Defying the direct orders of his sociopathic king, he draws his curved sword. The screech of metal rings out across the right flank. Thousands of armored cavalrymen, men who would rather die in a glorious charge than be humiliated in a defensive wall, draw their weapons in unison. There are no royal trumpets. There is only a single, throat-tearing war cry as the elite force physically detaches from the main line and surges forward. Picture the sheer kinetic terror of it. Thousands of tons of flesh, bone and steel accelerating to maximum speed. Zafar Khan's cavalry is not trotting. They are at a full, thundering gallop. The ground physically rolls like a localized earthquake. They slam headfirst into the center of the taunting Mongol vanguard. The impact is so violently abrupt, it creates a sonic shockwave. The smaller Mongol horses are physically crushed underneath the sheer mass of the Indian heavy cavalry. Swinging blades chop through boiled leather armor, sending ribbons of severed flesh into the air. Zafar Khan becomes a human threshing machine. He carves through the enemy front line, creating a localized hurricane of violence that physically pushes the Mongols backward. In that bloody, adrenaline-soaked moment, it looks like he is doing the impossible, breaking the vanguard of the Mongol Empire. The sheer, unadulterated aggression stuns the nomads. Their lines fracture, and they turn their horses to flee in chaos. Intoxicated by the bloodlust and the momentum, Zafar Khan spurs his horse into a relentless pursuit. But he fails to remember the coldest military truth of the 13th century. The Mongols never run away out of fear. They run away because it is a mechanical part of the slaughterhouse, and from the center of the battlefield, Alauddin Khalji sees it all. The tyrant king does not order the reserves forward to support his charging general. He just crosses his arms, smirks, and watches his greatest asset willingly gallop into a death trap. The Mongol feigned retreat is not a retreat. It is a psychological weapon. It is the military equivalent of a deep sea anglerfish dangling a glowing lure in front of a predator, only to snap its jaws shut in the dark. For decades, the Mongols have used this exact same tactic to annihilate Russian princes, Persian shahs, and Chinese emperors. It works every single time because it exploits the fatal flaw of heavy cavalry, which is ego. When armored men on massive horses see an enemy break and run, the adrenaline of the slaughter shuts down the logical part of their brain. They do not see a trap, they see prey. Zafar Khan is a brilliant general, but right now he is completely blind to reality. He is drunk on the momentum of the charge. His heavy cavalry is smashing through the Mongol rearguard, cutting down stragglers and trampling the dead. The dust is so thick you can chew it, making it impossible to see the horizon. The Mongol light cavalry stays just out of reach, absorbing the casualties, expertly managing the distance. They are riding backwards in the saddle, firing Parthian shots into the pursuing Indian ranks to keep them angry, bleeding, and entirely focused on the chase. They are dragging Zafar Khan away from the safety of the main army, yard by yard, mile by mile. This is where the dark geometry of medieval warfare becomes terrifying. As Zafar Khan pushes deeper into the wasteland, his formation begins to stretch and fragment. The heaviest, most exhausted horses fall behind. The faster, lighter elements push too far ahead. The impenetrable wall of steel that initiated the charge is turning into a disorganized mob scattered across the blistering plain. They cover 5 miles, then 10, then 15. The physical toll on the heavily armored Indian horses is catastrophic. They are foaming at the mouth, their lungs burning in the suffocating heat, pushed past the absolute limit of their endurance. By the time they hit the 18-mile mark, the trap is fully set. Back at the main battle line, the situation is a masterclass in sociopathic leadership. Alauddin Khalji is sitting atop his royal elephant, watching the massive cloud of dust disappear over the horizon. He knows exactly what the Mongols are doing. Every seasoned commander on that field knows what a feigned retreat looks like. His advisors are in a sheer panic, begging the Sultan to unleash the royal reserves, to send the left flank to cover Zafar Khan's exposed rear, to do anything to save the greatest military asset the Delhi Sultanate possesses. But Alauddin does nothing. He just sits there in the stifling heat, a chilling monument to political paranoia. This is the moment that separates conventional kings from true monsters. Alauddin is doing the math in his head. If he saves Zafar Khan, he keeps a brilliant general, but he also guarantees that Zafar Khan returns to Delhi as an invincible hero, a hero who commands the absolute loyalty of the army, a hero who could easily march into the palace and take the throne the exact same way Alauddin took it from his own uncle. But if he lets the Mongols swallow Zafar Khan whole, he solves his biggest domestic political problem without ever lifting a dagger. He is using the deadliest war machine on earth to execute his own general. He raises a hand and issues a strict, uncompromising order to the rest of the army. No one moves. No one reinforces the right flank. The left flank is commanded by Alauddin's brother, who also hates Zafar Khan. The center is locked down. They are going to let the hero of Delhi die in the dirt. It is a staggering display of callousness. Alauddin is gambling the entire survival of his empire, risking a total collapse of his right flank just to purge a political rival. He is willing to let his own men be butchered to secure his crown. Out in the suffocating dust, 18 miles away from salvation, the glowing lure of the anglerfish suddenly goes dark. The fleeing Mongol horsemen stop. They wheel their mounts around in terrifying, perfect synchronization. The dust begins to settle, revealing an ocean of fresh, unexhausted Mongol heavy cavalry waiting in a massive crescent formation. The hunt is over. The butchery is about to begin. 18 miles from the walls of Delhi, the blinding dust begins to settle, and the horrible geometry of the Mongol trap reveals itself. Zafar Khan pulls his exhausted warhorse to a halt. His cavalrymen are gasping for air, their faces caked in a thick layer of yellow dirt and sweat. The massive Indian chargers, pushed far beyond their physical limits, are foaming at the mouth, their chests heaving violently as some simply collapse and die of massive heart failure right there in the sand. Zafar Khan looks over his shoulder. There is no rescue column. There are no royal banners cutting through the haze. There is only an empty, blistering wasteland. He knows instantly that he has not just been outmaneuvered by the enemy, he has been betrayed by his own king. He turns back to face the horizon. The fleeing Mongol light cavalry has vanished behind a solid, terrifying wall of iron. The elite, heavy cavalry of the Chagatai Khanate now blocks his path. They are arrayed in a massive semicircle, effectively pinning Zafar Khan's exhausted forces against the barren landscape. The trap is perfectly sealed. A Mongol emissary rides forward, offering a chillingly practical proposition. Surrender, betray the Sultan who abandoned you, and join the Mongol war machine. It is a tempting offer for men staring down the barrel of a slaughter. But Zafar Khan is cut from a different, far more violent cloth. He knows Mongol mercy. Surrendering means being stripped naked, chained together, and driven forward as arrow fodder in the next siege. He spits at the emissary, draws his weapon, and prepares his men to die. If you are going to die in the dirt, you make sure the enemy drowns in their own blood first. Zafar Khan does not order his men into a tight defensive square to cower behind their shields. He orders an attack. It is an act of pure, distilled defiance. The surviving Rajput and Turkic cavalry spur their dying horses into one final, agonizing charge. The Mongols respond by blacking out the sun. 10,000 composite bows are drawn back with a unified, sickening creak of tension, and a localized iron monsoon is unleashed. The sky physically darkens as armor-piercing arrows rain down in suffocating waves. The sound of the volley hitting the Indian charge is like a butcher's cleaver slamming into a slab of meat over and over again. Arrows punch right through chainmail, splintering ribs and collapsing lungs. Warhorses, massive targets in the open plain, are struck dozens of times. When a 1,000-pound horse travelling at a full gallop suddenly dies, it does not just fall. It somersaults, violently crushing the armoured rider beneath it. The front ranks of Zafar Khan's charge are instantly turned into a horrific barricade of screaming men and shattered bone. But the survivors climb over the writhing bodies of their brothers and crash into the Mongol line. What follows is not a battle of brilliant tactics. It is a suffocating, claustrophobic meat grinder. Men are fighting so closely that they cannot swing their swords, resorting to drawing daggers and driving them into the exposed armpits and throats of the enemy. The air is thick with the copper stench of blood and evacuated bowels. At the center of this nightmare is Zafar Khan. His armor is practically nailed to his body by Mongol arrows. His horse has been killed out from under him, and he is fighting on foot. He is a walking corpse, bleeding from a dozen mortal wounds, but his sheer rage refuses to let his heart stop beating. He swings his heavy mace with the desperate strength of a man who has nothing left to lose, caving in Mongol helmets and shattering spines. His men rally around his dying frenzy. They are vastly outnumbered, completely exhausted and completely doomed, but they are fighting with a psychotic intensity that the Mongols have never seen before. They are not fighting to survive, they are fighting to inflict maximum, irreparable damage on the invincible horde. The trap has worked perfectly, but as the Mongol commanders watch their elite cavalrymen being physically torn apart by dead men walking, they realize they have made a catastrophic miscalculation. Zafar Khan dies exactly as he lived, covered in blood, surrounded by enemies, and completely abandoned by his king. But as his shattered body finally collapses into the dust of the Kili plain, the silence that falls over the Mongol ranks is not the sound of a triumphant victory, it is the sound of absolute shock. Qutlugh Khwaja rides his horse through the suffocating haze of the trap he just sprang. He expects to see a neat, manageable pile of slaughtered Indians. Instead, he is staring at a catastrophic butcher's bill. The ground is thickly carpeted not just with the heavily armoured corpses of Zafar Khan's cavalry, but with the mangled bodies of thousands of his own elite Mongol warriors. The Indian countercharge was a suicide mission, but it was executed with such terrifying psychotic aggression that it effectively pulverized the Mongol vanguard. The heavy iron maces and curved steel swords of the Rajput cavalry did not just kill, they physically dismantled the enemy. Mongol armor, primarily crafted from hardened leather and tightly woven silk, was brilliantly designed to catch arrows and deflect slashing blades. It was entirely useless against the blunt force, kinetic impact of a heavy iron mace swung by a desperate dying man. The slaughter was intimate, agonizingly slow, and relentlessly physical. This is not how Mongol warfare is supposed to function. For the better part of a century, the Mongol war machine has relied on a very specific, carefully cultivated psychological dynamic. They are the apex predators and everyone else on Earth is prey. When the Mongols spring a trap, the enemy is supposed to break. They are supposed to drop their heavy shields, beg to whatever god they worship, and die running with arrows in their backs. But Zafar Khan's men did not run. When they realized they were walking corpses, they simply weaponized their own demise. They turned a tactical encirclement into a claustrophobic meat grinder. The psychological damage of this realization ripples through the Chagatai horde like a toxic nerve agent. The aura of absolute mythological invincibility, the very thing that usually paralyzes entire empires before the Mongols even draw their bows, has been violently punctured. The veteran horsemen of the steppes are looking down at their dead brothers, their shattered weapons, and their bleeding horses, and a terrifying thought begins to take root in their collective mind. If one isolated, completely exhausted and politically betrayed general could inflict this much agonizing damage, what exactly is waiting for them back at the main battle line? Qutlugh Khwaja looks back toward the horizon, where the massive, choking dust cloud of the Sultanate's main army still hangs ominously in the stifling heat. Alauddin Khalji is still out there. He still has nearly 300,000 fresh, unexhausted soldiers. He has 3,000 heavily armored war elephants that have not even moved a muscle yet. And most terrifyingly, he has just empirically proven that he is a king so ruthlessly cold-blooded that he will happily sacrifice his best general and thousands of his own elite troops just to consolidate his domestic political power. The fundamental math of the invasion has instantly, violently changed. The Mongol Empire thrives on speed, terror, and low-casualty victories. They are a nomadic people. They do not have sprawling, heavily populated farming metropolises to draw endless waves of cheap conscripts from. Every single Mongol warrior is a lifetime investment, trained from early childhood to ride and shoot. You cannot replace them. When you lose thousands of elite heavy cavalrymen in a single afternoon to a trapped enemy, you do not just lose soldiers, you lose hardened veterans who cannot be replenished. A grinding war of attrition is the one thing a nomadic army simply cannot survive. To conquer Delhi now, Qutlugh Khwaja realizes he will have to wade through an ocean of his own people's blood. The myth of the unstoppable horde has just crashed headfirst into the brutal, ugly reality of Indian heavy armor and a tyrant's total disregard for human life. Night falls on the Kili plain, bringing with it a chilling, suffocating silence. The chaotic screaming of the melee, the deafening crunch of shattering metal, and the terrifying roars of the armored war elephants have finally given way to the weak, wet groans of dying men. Tens of thousands of corpses litter the barren landscape, their blood mixing with the dust to form a thick, foul-smelling mud under the pale moonlight. Inside the Mongol camp, there is no celebration. There is no triumphant singing or the clinking of stolen gold that usually follows a nomadic purge. Instead, there is a heavy, oppressive atmosphere of sheer, unadulterated shock. Qutlugh Khwaja, the proud prince of the Chagatai Khanate, sits completely paralyzed in his command tent, surrounded by his bleeding, exhausted generals. Yes, the trap worked perfectly. They killed the legendary Zafar Khan. They completely annihilated the right flank of the Delhi army. By every metric of warfare the Mongol Empire has ever known, the Indian forces should have shattered, turned their backs, and offered their necks to the slaughter. But the reality of the math is grotesque. The price the Mongol war machine had to pay to kill one single general and his vanguard is a catastrophic, unsustainable number. Thousands of the absolute best Mongol warriors, the elite heavy cavalry that had terrorized empires from the Pacific Ocean to the borders of Europe, are dead. They were physically pulped into the dirt by the heavy iron maces and curved steel blades of the Rajput charge. Put yourself in the boots of a Mongol veteran on that pitch-black plain. You are an apex predator, born in the saddle, conditioned from birth to believe your bloodline is fundamentally invincible. You view infantrymen as livestock waiting to be harvested. But today, on this miserable, dusty anvil, you watched your prey turn into psychotic monsters. You saw Indian cavalrymen looking like pincushions with a dozen arrows sticking out of their chests, physically tear through your brother's leather armor with their bare hands just to pull a Mongol down into the mud with them. For the first time in your life, you and your nomadic brothers feel the one emotion the Mongol Empire usually reserves for the rest of the world: absolute, bone-chilling terror. Qutlugh Khwaja is ruthless, but he is a pragmatist. Even if he commits his entire surviving force to a full frontal assault tomorrow morning and somehow wins, it will be a suicidal victory. His army will be ground down to a fraction of its size, leaving him without enough men to hold a hostile subcontinent, let alone survive the long march back to the steppes. And out there, hiding in the dark just a few miles away, the tyrant Alauddin Khalji is still sitting on his royal elephant. He is backed by a colossal army of nearly 300,000 fresh soldiers and 3,000 uninjured war elephants. Alauddin has sent a horrific, undeniable message. He will happily feed his own elite troops into a meat grinder without blinking. Fighting an enemy who has no moral boundaries, no empathy for his own citizens, and endless resources is a death sentence for a nomadic horde. And so, a decision entirely alien to Mongol history is made in the dark. There are no war horns, there are no rallying speeches. Under the cover of total darkness, the most terrifying military machine on earth quietly packs up its tents. Qutlugh Khwaja orders his men to turn their horses around. They leave their dead unburied. They abandon their dreams of an Indian conquest, and they silently retreat north, fleeing the Kili plain like battered ghosts, terrified of the morning sun. When the first light of dawn finally hits the massive sandstone walls of Delhi, the citizens and Alauddin's army strain their eyes toward the dusty horizon. The enemy has simply evaporated. The mythological aura of absolute Mongol invincibility has been permanently buried under the blood-soaked dirt of Kili. When the sun fully rises over the Kili plain, the citizens of Delhi look out from their towering sandstone walls and realize they are not going to die. The apocalypse has been cancelled. The Chagatai horde has vanished, leaving behind only the rotting corpses of their horses, the swirling yellow dust, and the shattered bodies of Zafar Khan's vanguard. Delhi has survived the greatest existential threat in its history. But as the massive iron-studded gates groan open and Alauddin Khalji rides back into his capital, the cheering crowds are quickly silenced by a cold, suffocating reality. They have not been saved by a benevolent shepherd protecting his flock. They have been saved by a butcher protecting his slaughterhouse. Alauddin does not use this monumental victory to usher in an era of peace, healing, and prosperity. He uses the terrifying, lingering memory of the Mongol invasion to completely break the will of his own people. He turns the Delhi Sultanate into an absolute, suffocating police state. To maintain his massive standing army, he implements price controls so severe that they defy economic logic. If a merchant in the market is caught shortchanging a customer by even a fraction of an ounce, Alauddin's network of spies ensures that the merchant has the exact equivalent weight in raw flesh violently carved from his own thighs in the public square. He bans the nobility from hosting social gatherings, terrified they might plot against him in the dark. He heavily taxes the peasantry until they are left with barely enough grain to survive the winter. He turns his entire empire into a paranoid, heavily armed, permanent military garrison. The Mongols would eventually return in the years that followed, but the spell was forever broken. Qutlugh Khwaja, the arrogant prince who sought to erase India, died on the brutal journey back to the steppes, succumbing to his wounds and the sheer exhaustion of the campaign. The Chagatai Khanate would launch other raids, but they never again brought their women and children. They knew that marching on Delhi meant walking into a claustrophobic meat grinder operated by a tyrant who did not play by the established rules of war. Alauddin had permanently altered the psychological math of Mongol expansion. This is the deeply uncomfortable, ugly truth of the Battle of Kili. When we study history, we are desperate to find the good guys. We want to believe that righteousness, courage, and moral purity will always triumph over evil. But the Mongol war machine did not care about moral purity. They had spent a century crushing righteous kings and noble defenders into the dirt. The only thing that finally shattered their aura of invincibility in India was a ruler who was actually more ruthless, more paranoid, and more willing to sacrifice his own people than the Mongols were. Alauddin Khalji was a sociopath who murdered his own uncle to steal a throne, deliberately abandoned his greatest general to die in the dust to solve a political problem, and ruled his subjects through sheer, unadulterated terror. Yet because of his psychosis, the people of the Indian subcontinent were not subjected to the systemic, industrial-scale genocide that erased the populations of Persia, Russia, and the Middle East. The vibrant, chaotic, and ancient culture of India survived the 13th century because a monster stood at the gates and bared his fangs at the wolves. History does not always give us a hero in shining armor. Sometimes, when the night is dark enough and the enemy is terrifying enough, history simply gives us a survivor. And survival, as the blood-soaked sands of Kili proved, is rarely a clean business. If you made it to the end of this journey, you are clearly someone who values the deep, gritty, and often uncomfortable truths of our past. If this story of survival and betrayal resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We are building a library of history's most brutal, forgotten moments, and I want you to be a part of it. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Alauddin's brutal methods were justified by the existential threat of the Mongols? Or was he just a tyrant using a crisis to cement his own absolute power? I read every comment, and I would love to hear your perspective. And if you want to see how another empire dealt with an impossible invasion, click the video on your screen right now to dive into our next dark history. Until next time, remember that the past is never as simple as we want it to be. Enter Zafar Khan. If Alauddin Khalji is the monster sitting on the throne, Zafar Khan is his fangs. He is the greatest and most terrifying general of the Delhi Sultanate. But in the paranoid, cutthroat world of medieval politics, greatness is a death sentence. Alauddin does not have friends, he only has potential enemies. And Zafar Khan, who has crushed Mongol scouting parties in the past, is becoming a massive problem. The soldiers worship him, the citizens cheer for him. To a domestic tyrant who sleeps with a dagger under his pillow, Zafar Khan's popularity is far more dangerous than the 200,000 Mongols currently waiting outside. As the dust swirls over the Kili plain, Zafar Khan commands the right flank of the Delhi army. He leads the absolute elite, heavily armored cavalry, Rajput and Turkic warriors born to fight. But right now they are slowly baking alive inside their iron armor under the suffocating heat. The tension is so thick you can hear the metal grinding as restless warhorses shift their weight. Across the killing field, the Mongols begin their deadly psychological game. They do not launch a full assault. Instead, they send waves of light cavalry forward to taunt. They ride in, unleash a localized blizzard of armor-piercing arrows into Zafar Khan's formation, and wheel away laughing. The arrows thud into wooden shields and punch through horse barding, drawing panicked neighs and fresh blood that stains the arid dirt. Alauddin's orders were explicitly clear. Do not break formation. No one moves. They are to stand there, absorb the arrows, and force the Mongols into a static melee. But Zafar Khan is not a man who will stand still and be carved apart from a distance. As his loyal men begin to drop, dying in their own blood without permission to strike back, the restraint finally snaps. Zafar Khan makes a decision that will change the entire geometry of the battle, and possibly the history of the subcontinent. Defying the direct orders of his sociopathic king, he draws his curved sword. The screech of metal rings out across the right flank. Thousands of armored cavalrymen, men who would rather die in a glorious charge than be humiliated in a defensive wall, draw their weapons in unison. There are no royal trumpets, there is only a single, throat-tearing war cry as the elite force physically detaches from the main line and surges forward. Picture the sheer kinetic terror of it. Thousands of tons of flesh, bone, and steel accelerating to maximum speed. Zafar Khan's cavalry is not trotting, they are at a full, thundering gallop. The ground physically rolls like a localized earthquake. They slam headfirst into the center of the taunting Mongol vanguard. The impact is so violently abrupt it creates a sonic shockwave. The smaller Mongol horses are physically crushed underneath the sheer mass of the Indian heavy cavalry. Swinging blades chop through boiled leather armor, sending ribbons of severed flesh into the air. Zafar Khan becomes a human threshing machine. He carves through the enemy front line, creating a localized hurricane of violence that physically pushes the Mongols backward. In that bloody, adrenaline-soaked moment, it looks like he is doing the impossible, breaking the vanguard of the Mongol Empire. The sheer, unadulterated aggression stuns the nomads. Their lines fracture, and they turn their horses to flee in chaos. Intoxicated by the bloodlust and the momentum, Zafar Khan spurs his horse into a relentless pursuit. But he fails to remember the coldest military truth of the 13th century. The Mongols never run away out of fear. They run away because it is a mechanical part of the slaughterhouse. And from the center of the battlefield, Alauddin Khalji sees it all. The tyrant king does not order the reserves forward to support his charging general. He just crosses his arms, smirks, and watches his greatest asset willingly gallop into a death trap.